Hello everyone, welcome to MzansiOz Diary. My name is Connie. So today I just wanted to talk to you all about our election, how Australia, oi, 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 Aussie, oi, oi. How was the election? Went on Saturday. So we had our election last Saturday. So it seems like a long time ago, actually. Yeah, we had our election. Yes, the 2025, federal election marked a significant change, actually a significant shift in the nation's political landscape, with the Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, securing a landslide victory. Yeah.
Take us through, first of all, the headline numbers. Where are the seat numbers at overall?
The Labor Party has 86 seats, the Coalition 39. I think later this afternoon, it looks like Labor's set to win 3 more seats, which has been the ACT, Southern ACT seat, where an independent has challenged the preference counts are coming through and indicating Labor is getting enough preferences to hold that. Franklin in southern Tasmania, where Julie Collins, the Agriculture Minister, was challenged by Peter George, an independent contesting on the salmon farming issue. At this stage, he's not getting enough preferences to win that seat, so Labor's hanging on there. And Fremantle in Western Australia, where independent Kate Hewlett was challenging Labor's Joss Wilson. Again, he's getting enough preferences, so he should be able to hang on to those seats. So if that trend continues, Labor will get to 89 seats with still some more they could possibly win.
89 seats, can you put that in perspective for us? How significant a majority is that in a historical sense?
Well, that's an enormous majority. I mean, that's 11, that's about a 27, 28 seat majority. Tony Abbott was elected with 90 seats. So it's on a par with that. Of course, the minor party vote is much larger these days and the major party vote lower. But the Abbott landslide in 2013, that's of a similar scale to what Labor's achieved here in seats.
Bloodbath, electoral bloodbath. And so this outcome of the 2025, May 25 election was widely viewed and interpreted by political analysts as a repudiation of the Liberal National Coalition's campaign strategies under the opposition leader Peter Dutton, particular how they focus on divisive cultural issues reminiscent of the current US President Donald Trump. And I did gave you a couple of 2 videos about that were relevant to the MzansiOz Diary about why people calling Peter Dutton as a tame Trump, about the woke and the white Afrikaner refugees that he invoked in 2017. He wasn't a refugee per se, but he invoked the kind of white immigration policies and suggested that Australia should actually have a visa category for white Afrikaner in Australia in 2017. Then Donald Trump followed in the same time, sort of. But I posted a video about that story about the white South African story that at the time he had watched a clip on Fox, conspiracy clips on Fox. Fox likes to play all of these conspiracy theorists and stuff, and they play that video, and he watched that documentary series, and suddenly he tweeted and suggested that and publicly, and we had a huge diplomatic row between South Africa and Australia in 2017. At the time, he was a foreign minister, so the Liberal was in power at the time. He was a foreign minister then. But, this time around, he actually did nearly cause another row, actually, with Indonesia, because he had read something and then suddenly accused them of having working with Russia. Oh, yeah. I don't know what these people read. Yeah, and so, and then with a couple of things that the cultural wars and that they invoked, and they thought that would be a fantastic idea to bring about American policies and copy paste that policy in Australia. For me, as a voter and Australian voters, I was actually flabbergasted. I felt like, how dare they think, we are a copy version of America. They don't even recognize us as people, that we're uniquely different. So therefore, you need to be able to bring about policies that are relevant to the community, not the one you copy paste elsewhere. Copy and then you want to paste it in Australia. So yeah, Peter Dutton's campaign really, yeah, it was a campaign that did not have any objective. It featured critiques of what they termed the woke. I mean, woke culture. He's had that many times, even from 2017.
What will the coalition do to tackle the woke agendas that are being pushed through our education system?
We do provide funding to the state governments, and we can condition that funding. And we should be saying to states, and we should be saying to those that are receiving that funding, that we want our kids to be taught the curriculum, and we want our kids to be taught what it is they're needed to take on as they face the challenges of the world, and not to be guided into some sort of an agenda that's come out of universities. And I think there's a lot of work to do, but that's the way in which the government can try and influence the New South Wales government or the Queensland government or the Victorian government, whatever it might be. And I think that's, again, a debate that we need to hear more from parents on. I think there is a silent majority on this issue right across the community. And when the government, at the start of this term of Parliament, tried to stop independent schools and religious schools from deciding on who they could employ or what they were going to teach at their school, I think there was an uprising then, not just from the religious leaders, but from parents as well, who pushed back on that. And I think that was, something that the government dropped fairly quickly thereafter because they knew they were going down the wrong path. But again, I think it's a big difference between the two parties.
How are you defining woke?
Well, I answered that question yesterday. I think the point that I see that's of interest as well is what we would do in relation to education funding and health funding. We are absolutely committed to health and education funding as the numbers appear in the budget papers. So before the Prime Minister goes off trying to scare people again, and that's what he's doing at the moment because he's trying to pick fights, he's trying to scare people, but he's, maybe good at that. I'll tell you what he's very bad at, that is helping families. Australian families.
Indoctrination was your word. Yeah. What topics are indoctrination that's in the curriculum?
Well, we've spoken before, and including yesterday in relation to it. I want young Australians who are going to school to get the best education they can. I don't want them indoctrinated according to the views of the lecturer at university or in relation to the views of the particular teacher. I want our kids to be taught according to community beliefs and standards, and I think that is the expectation of families. Not controversial here in the suburbs. It might be at the ABC, but not controversial here in the suburbs, and that's exactly what we're after.
Last night, a woman asked you about getting the woke agenda out of schools, and you spoke about potentially conditioning funding from schools to change their curriculums or to influence their curriculum. I think influence was the word that you used. Could I ask specifically what lessons or units you're concerned about having a woke agenda?
I want to make sure that our kids, whether they're at primary school or secondary school or indeed young Australians who are at universities, are receiving the education that their parents would expect them to receive. And our position will reflect community standards in relation to what is being taught at our schools and our universities. And you've seen some recent examples in relation to law school and the requirements being made. I think it was Macquarie University at the time. You've seen other academics who are out as part of protests on the streets and teachers similarly. That's being translated into the classroom. That's not something I support. I support young Australians being able to think freely, being able to assess what's before them and not being told and indoctrinated with something that is the agenda of others.
He also targeted the the practice of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the welcome to country ceremonies and the display of Aboriginal flag at the official event. This led to also the group called neo-Nazi group booing at ANZAC dawn services. Led to many people on social media posting, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, in relation to the booing of people who were invited to come and perform the ceremonial welcome to country, culturally significant ceremonial welcome to country, significant for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, First Nation people of Australia. Significant for the First Nation of Australia. So welcome to country.
Let's just for 1 second, right, put the debate about whether or not welcome to country should have been at the ANZAC service or not. And let's just remember, they were invited to be there. They didn't insist on being there, invited to be there. So the anger and the hate and the vitriol should not go to the people who perform the ceremony or do the ceremony. It should be going to the organisers. But let's have a think about one thing, right? Neo-Nazis turned up and booed at an ANZAC service. And I haven't heard very many people complain about the neo-Nazis booing. I've heard a lot of people complain about the welcome to country, right? What do the neo-Nazis want? The neo-Nazis want no welcome to countries ever. They don't want any Aboriginal culture in our society. They don't want black people in our society. They don't want brown people in our society. They don't want fucking yellow people in our society. They don't want anyone in their society. And Australians have let their hate, right, and their subtle racism overcome the fact that neo-Nazis turned up to a dawn service and booed. And the Australian public have let neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day. And you want to say that someone who is invited to perform a service should be disgusted and disgraced for themselves, right? When Nazis killed the people you were there to honour, and the neo-Nazis had a goal, and with the recent poll about how many people think welcome to country should exist in any way, shape or form anywhere, reveals that Australians have decided they've rejected it completely, which is exactly what the neo-Nazis want. You've let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day. You've let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day. You've let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day. And you're all proud of yourselves. Forget about fucking welcome to country. Have a think for 1 second about the fact that you've let neo-Nazis achieve their goal. You've advanced the cause of neo-Nazism because of your subtle racism and your hate and vitriol towards First Nations people and their culture. You've let neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day. Australia, the Australian public, you need to understand you have let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day with your subtle racism and your hate towards First Nations people and their culture. You've let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC, the fact. You've let neo-Nazis advance their cause because of your subtle racism and your hate. You've let the neo-Nazis win on ANZAC Day, and I'm fucking ashamed to be an Australian. So just hear me out on this one, right?
Yes, that was the reaction following all of that. Of course, stoked by them, their coalition, and the people on that side, stoking all of this. So I hope that you guys can stop all of this attacking the First Nations culture. As he has said in this video, the people who perform this are invited to perform the ceremony. Okay, they're invited to do that, and that is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. Arguably the longest living culture that we know of. So so attacking the culture of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the First Nation people, in the election campaign. And you think you're going to have people going to vote for you, all of them? So only few would do that. And we've seen there's a lot of pie. I'm not saying that this election was played on just this part little clip, but you see how the coalition pissed a lot of people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, the Chinese people, the South African, the white Afrikaner thing was evoked again, and by Donald Trump, and they copied that Donald Trump kind of Temu type policy, and it became very significant for the person who first evoked the white Afrikaner in 2017. So there was a lot of diverse culture in Australia that what the coalition presented was absolutely a repudiation. Many stuff. There could be women, working women. You see how many people were pissed by coalition and the policy they presented. He also called for boycott of companies like Woolworth for their decisions related to Australia's Day merchandise. The position really were part of this broader strategy to engage in cultural debates. And then he was aiming to galvanize the particular voter base. And that particular voter base, it's actually far right, neo-Nazi type, to the far right of the party. They're not in the center if you're going to do that. So he galvanized those votes, and then he was hoping that he would get those votes to vote. Even if he had those votes voted, if all of them voted for him, they don't make the Australian electorate. So the problem is this approach, appeared to backfire. It backfired big time for Peter Dutton. Voters across various demographics, including women. And he also pissed off women, by saying that he was going to stop working from home. Imagine. So working from home in the cost of living pressure, where most women, they work from home, they run their business at home, just like I am now. This morning I was busy working, running my business at home. So he wanted to stop that, have a policy of no work from home. It's for women, for young Australians, ethnically diverse communities. That support shifted away from the coalition. It really did. It shifted. That emphasis on cultural issues failed to address the pressing concerns such as cost of living, the housing affordability, public service funding. And that led to this perception that the coalition was out of touch with the electoral priorities. They had policy, and the one that I did like originally was this gas preservation when it was first announced, but it was lost in this chaotic campaign, that policy, because they didn't, afterwards more revelation came to that it wasn't going to work, and also because they've also voted against it anyway when it was proposed by the Labor. More of it became like Delulu.
Lulu with no Salulu, Mr. Speaker. They are completely delusional. And then they had to hide to say, energy prices, we care about it. They voted against caps, and they voted against the energy bill relief of $300, and they voted against, and didn't support our second lot of energy bill relief as well.
The member for...
Like, you know, and yeah, so yeah, some people think there was a Trump factor there. And because Trump's tariff that I've been talking about in my posting about the stock market, the geoeconomics, and about how the impact of that, of his rhetoric around its tariffs that are unjustifiable to these countries, including Lesotho, 50% tariff for Lesotho for making jeans. But we had 10% tariff in Australia, and those tariffs were for what? Like many of those countries, really. Those tariff, the highest effective tariff rates, like I said, it's 1%. And that in the modern economy, of course, in the modern economy, it's around 1%. And here comes Donald. So that policy has actually made stock markets to be, it has rattled a lot of people, including the financial markets. This is, yeah, it was very confrontational rhetoric and focus on cultural divisions and seen as miscalculation. Yeah, so the Australian voters appear to reject this approach. This approach has been rejected by Australian voters. They favoured instead the more inclusive and policy-focused discourse, which is, that's me there. You've got to have a policy that includes everybody.
To what extent was the result genuinely earned through good policy, and how much was simply the public turning away from far-right politics as part of a broader global rejection of Trump-style conservatism like we saw in Canada last week?
Do you think there was a rejection because of Trump?
Donald Trump is toxic in Australian politics, and he should be, because he doesn't represent our values. He is as disapproved of by most coalition voters as he is by voters on the left. And I mean, one thing Donald Trump has done, by the way, he has ended the culture wars in Australia. Because after this election, any person from...
Do you promise? Can you sign this on a piece of paper? No, really, do you promise? Wait. Do you really think Donald Trump's ended the culture wars in Australia? Big call.
Well, let me finish. Because after the experience of Saturday, any conservative politician who is perceived rightly or wrongly to be engaged with or entertaining the sort of Trump culture war agenda is going to be repudiated by the public. The culture wars, Trump is poison, electoral poison in Australia. He is a no-go zone, and that's one of the learnings that I'm sure the coalition will take from this election.
Will you take that?
Look, I am a proud conservative, small c conservative, Burkean conservative on this panel, always have been. I don't think Donald Trump is a conservative.
Quite right.
I think he
Absolutely
is
right.
A man elected to a place that doesn't have compulsory preferential voting, who has played into that.
All right.
Our strongest ally, and his whole mantra is to actually tear down the very institutions that have built that. That's very anti-conservative.
Has Trump ended the culture wars in Australia?
Depends whose culture, Patricia, because when we say the culture wars, there's people that... I represent the 9 million Australians who don't live in capital cities, who have very different views, which is why they vote the way they do. And we need to have our views of the world, our values, respected as equally as anyone's, whether it's Rebecca's or inner city suburban seats.
So we will still have arguments about welcome to country?
Well, one of my senators is Jacinta Price, who has a very strong view about those type of matters. So do we need to be divisive and not inclusive? No. We need to be an inclusive, respectful, diverse country. And the thing that we've seen happen over time is that we can't have a difference of opinion and express that respectfully. We've all got to somehow agree, and that's actually not what a liberal democracy is
Tony
about.
Burke, are the culture wars over?
Oh, I wish that were true. And I hope it's true. Like, the simplicity is every culture war involves being mean to someone. That's what they are. And there will always be someone who thinks there's some political advantage in that. But if to any extent we're going to have less of it, it just means we're a little bit kinder. I think.
Did Trump help you win this election?
I don't. I think
he was helpful.
No.
He was helpful.
Events, dear boy, events.
We ran on our merits, and I do think Australians don't like the concept of copying things from overseas. There's a lot to be proud of our country, and patriotism is not simply 100%. An argument about uniforms and flags. It's also an argument about ideas that come from Australia.
Did Trump give the election to Labor, or was it more?
No, he certainly didn't. I mean, this debate concerns me a lot. I mean, Trump is poison in this country for every good reason. And there's no doubt that the way he implemented the tariff policy, the collapse in the share market, as Australians found their super accounts heading south, obviously Trump was a factor, a not insignificant factor that helped the Labor Party and hurt the Liberal Party. But I think it's completely wrong for people to suggest we are another version of Canada. If Trump had not been involved in this debate at all, if he'd not been involved in this campaign, I've got no doubt at all Albanese would still have won, Peter Dutton would still have lost, and the reason for this is there are deep-seated Australian factors at work here. Yeah. I mean, we can't pretend and sort of engage in this nonsense that somehow Donald Trump and the impact of Donald Trump is responsible for what happened in this country last weekend. That's wrong. That's an exaggeration. It helps no side of Australian politics for people to say that and think that, because it's misleading.
So do we all agree on the panel? I just want to...
And once you have a society that is full of this divisive rhetoric, and you can see, you become more divided. You become really divided. So, yeah. And you also had, some people making the MAGA stuff in Australia.
Make Australia great again. That was the vow of Coalition Senator Jacinta Price today as she joined Peter Dutton's election pitch. Ms Price denied it's an ode to Donald Trump, as both leaders greeted voters in Perth in the lead-up to officially launching their campaigns tomorrow.
Firebrand Senator Jacinta Price proving to be a fan favourite among Liberals.
We can make Australia great again.
Is that an ode to Donald Trump?
No, if I said that, I don't even realise I said that, but no.
But similarities with the Trump campaign not ending there.
Race, gender, sexuality, none of that is going to matter. What's going to matter is the right person for the job.
The senator vowing to vigorously pursue government efficiency and conservative bugbears.
They are learning indoctrination as opposed to education. We will conduct an audit into the spending in Indigenous affairs. Ridiculous grants like colonising, breastfeeding.
Outlining a wish list of radical change.
That's exactly why Jacinta Price will be in a cabinet that I lead. You onions?
Two leaders with very different visions.
We've got cooks, but they've got...
So the consequences of this campaign by the coalition was historic, what with Peter Dutton losing his own seat at Dixon, a rare occurrence for a major party leader in Australian politics as an opposition leader. So this has actually prompted an introspection within the Liberal Party, with some members criticising the campaign's focus on cultural issues at the expense of substantial policy discussions. There's also growing recognition that future successes will require a shift towards addressing the tangible concerns of Australians and moving away from divisive cultural debates. So in a nutshell, the May 2025 election has demonstrated that the Australian electorate's preferences for inclusive, policy-driven leadership over campaigns centered on cultural division. The results suggest that a clear mandate for addressing core issues affecting Australians' daily lives and rejection of strategies that prioritize cultural conflicts over constructive governance. We can all agree to that. So that's how it went. So we're not going to have, looks like we're not going to have a white Afrikaner refugee in Australia. Thank God for that.